and it is a pleasure to open this public discussion on women in politics and women in the media, which is a great theme of interest to me personally, professionally, and intellectually. So allow me right Malta tinbidel moment where I wish to share with you two anecdotes that are intended to illustrate an argument on the basis of lived experience. My fascination with the theme of women in politics started as a child when I was walking in the village centre with my dad, and we came across a little corner meeting that was being held in my hometown, St. Paul's Bay. At that time there were about 2,000 people living in St. Paul's Bay. The speaker was a young female candidate, and I was then just one of about half a dozen people who stopped to follow her maiden speech. This candidate was never elected, in spite of many long years of activism. But she later made it to become Malta's first female speaker in the House of Representatives. To date, whenever we cross paths, Miriam Debono loves to remind me of that moment when I was just 8 years old, because she had actually asked me my age at that point, because I stared at her so curiously and for so long that somehow I had made an impression. Along the years, I became a keen observer of politics, and by politics I do not merely mean partisan politics. One of the burning questions that has not left me since then was the invisibility of women in the public sphere, the cultural and structural impediments that led to the gender imbalance in our parliament, and the prevalent amnesia when it comes to women's contribution in the history of Malta's nation-building project. One clear example: last night's news commemorated the 40th anniversary since the plate on the famous Triton fountain was damaged. But I do not remember that last year, most of the media organizations failed to remember the 70th anniversary of women's enfranchisement. There was hardly any airtime dedicated to it. So as I grew up, I had become fascinated with journalism, which was my first chosen profession. I dabbled in feminist columns, writing under a pseudonym, because then I was underage and hesitant to let my parents know what was going on in my head. In the course of my studies, I met other women, and we all found it very hard to penetrate all male news organizations because of our gender. In my first attempt, I was actually employed on a false premise. Instead of giving me experience as a cop reporter as promised, I was given work that was deemed more suitable for a girl, that is, clerical work in a cash office. Two other female journalism students suffered similar fates. One later moved to London, where she still works for a successful communications firm. The other was the late Daphne Caruana Galizia. If you dig into her columns, you will find that she has recounted the terrible time that she, or rather we, faced at the time. When I finally did manage to work for a news organization, there were only two other female reporters in Malta, Anna Bonanno and Liliana Riziot. In the 60s, there was also the late Susan Mulvaney, and in the 70s, Roshi Berras. But there were very few, and most of the news organizations or media organizations were male domains. As a result, I strongly felt that journalism was a vehicle for change. The media often mirror gender-based discrimination, but I also believed that they may narrow down the gaps. And with the growing centrality of media in political life, the media also have the potential to leave an imprint on political agendas and citizenship. However, patriarchal hegemony over production processes and gendered media texts may in fact reinforce traditional arrangements. The advent of interactive technologies and social media is in itself an interesting phenomenon. In fact, we say that these technologies are disruptive technologies. There is, of course, an army of traditionalists out there that are hitting out at advancement and political correctness, but there are also refreshing online groups that bring together women from all walks of life to share experiences, opinions, advice, and to put issues on the national agenda. And as I speak, I'm thinking of that gem of a Facebook page, Women for Women. Now, allow me to wear my hat as pro-rector. 1919 was a very important date for the University of Malta. While male students were busy participating in the protests and riots associated with the Sette Giugno, the first 2 female students were accepted to study at the university. Their names were Tessie Camilleri and Blanche Weber, and the rector that brought about the change was Sir Temi Zammit. Next year marks the 100 years of this significant step forward, and we must not let it pass without commemorating it. 12 years ago, the university made a massive advancement when it comes to gender-related figures. Since 2006, the majority of our graduates are female. During the last graduation ceremony, women made up 59% of our graduates at all levels, including the numbers of masters and PhDs that were awarded in the last graduation ceremonies. This silent revolution will hopefully lead the change and erode some of the remaining patriarchal bastions. The University of Malta is proud to be a leader in these developments, and we strongly support action research where data and interpretations are then transposed into policies and actions. I wish to thank the European Parliament Office in Malta, the Gender Studies Department in the University of Malta, the National Council of Women, the Malta Confederation of Women's Organizations that have collaborated to host this discussion. I augur that we will have a fruitful and interesting debate.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Pro-Rector. That was fascinating. Dove back into our history. Good morning, everyone. Jina għanna Zammit Vella, bħalissa ġent kap tal-Uffiċċju tal-Parlament hawnhekk f'Malta. Nilqawkom, nirringrazzjakom li ġejtu. Se ngħid ukoll li d-diskussjoni se mmexxuha bl-Ingliż sabiex kulħadd ikun jista' jipparteċipa inkluża l-Professur Murphy. Min jixtieq jikkummenta jew jagħmel xi mistoqsijiet bil-Malti merħba bih u aħna nkunu nistgħu nitraduċu. I will now switch to English to say good morning again and thank you for joining us for this discussion today on women in politics and women in the media. My name is Zammit Vella, acting head of the EP office in Malta. First of all, I wish to thank the university for hosting us today. It's a pleasure to bring our discussions here to the University of Campus in Malta, and a pleasure to see so many of you, men as well as women, joining us this morning. So welcome. Thanks also to the Faculty of Social Wellbeing and the Department of Gender Studies. And I welcome and thank our honourable MEPs, Roberta Metsola, Miriam DALLI, Francis and Dimech, as well as Chief Editor, Editor-in-Chief rather, at RTK, Sylvana Debono. And Marlene. Marlene, I did say that. I am very sorry if I did not. Mrs. Marlene Mizzi, our honourable MEP from the Socialist and Democrat Group. Our moderator today is Attard, another professional in the media industry. And joining us shortly via video conference will be Prof. Brenda Murphy, head of the Department of Gender Studies, and author of a case study on Malta in a recent Parliament study on gender equality in the media sector. I also welcome our partners for this event, the National Council of Women and the Malta Confederation of Women's Organizations. This discussion will be on for about 90 minutes. I hope many of you have turned out not only to listen to our strong panel today, but also to have your say and participate in what we'll be talking about. I should let you know that we are filming this discussion for our Facebook page. Quite a few people have written in to say they wish they could be here. So if any of your friends are amongst us, please do let them know that they can look it up on the EP Office Valletta Facebook page. That's a page that also includes information about Parliament's events, the action from our MEPs, particularly in plenary and committee sessions. And I would also like to let you know that shortly the University of Malta will be hosting a Europe Direct Information Center at the Institute of European Studies. Today's discussion. This is a discussion being held to mark International Women's Day, a few days ahead of time. But Women's Day is not just the 8th of March. Women's rights, women's equality should be an everyday thing in our lives. It's incredible that in 2018 we are still talking about it. As Carmen mentioned very interestingly, many women in different generations have done their bit to break the glass ceilings. And yet, and I refer here directly to some comments online in the last couple of days, to a story on women in politics, we still get opinions to the effect that women are unequal or not good at politics. I think the Maltese electorate had a different opinion in the last EP elections. Unfortunately, in real terms, the figures show that we are lagging way behind in gender equality. I can give you a lot of detail here, but I will give you the broad picture. The first Gender Equality Index by the EU Institute for Gender Equality suggested the EU as a whole was halfway towards gender equality. Last year's index, the latest one, showed progress, but at a snail's pace. Malta is making progress. We are still just under the halfway mark, according to this index. Our primary strength as a country lies in terms of gender equality in the health domain, but we still face significant challenges in the domain of power. Women are seriously lacking from decision-making positions in the political sphere, and as the media study showed, also in the media sector. What, therefore, is the European Parliament doing for gender equality? We will have for sure more on this from our MEPs, but the legal basis under the treaties is that the EU can enact legislation to combat gender-based discrimination, and it is committed to upholding and promoting the principle of gender equality in all of its actions. Parliament, as co-legislation, is pushing for better and better equality laws. It's making recommendations to member states for better working conditions, better social policies, more work-life balance, pushing very hard for the implementation of equal pay for equal work, already enshrined in a 2006 directive, but we are still not doing so well. So we have even called for a revision or even a new directive in this regard. We have proposed more maternity leave, more parental leave, and in a recent resolution, even compulsory paternity leave to allow fathers to participate in childcare and to share the burden of care or the pleasure of care more equally amongst parents. On women's participation in politics, the European Parliament has more women in its ranks than the vast majority of the lower houses of the EU's member states, making it one of the most gender equal elected bodies in the world. According to a London School of Economics study, while still short of full parity, women have consistently achieved a larger seat share since the first elections in 1979 compared to their national parliaments. Women now make up 37% of the European Parliament. In this context, Malta's voters performed much better than average in terms of female participation in the 2014 election, electing 4 female MEPs out of our 6. If you've picked up a copy of our graphs from outside the room where we've put some materials for you, or if your eyesight is really sharp, you will see us topping the list in terms of female representation in the European Parliament. And yet, we lag very, very far behind in terms of representation in the national parliament. Why? It is the same electorate, mostly the same parties, so what could be going on in our national psyche? Many theories have been put forward for this. I see our members smiling, so I hope they, as protagonists, will be able to shed some light directly for us, directly on this, including the male perspective from Francis. I will not take too long on the media sector because our first speaker will be Prof. Brenda Murphy, who we can now see on the screens. in our room, so this is a chance to hear directly from the source of some very interesting data. We also have on our panel a long-standing media professional in Sylvana Debono and another long-standing professional moderating our debate today. So I'll just leave you with a few thoughts to ponder. What do women bring to politics, and how do we contribute to make politics a force for good? How difficult is it for women to break into politics? Is being a media personality a help or a hindrance? What are the obstacles for women in either camp, and the risks in public life? And which is the right way forward to overcome these obstacles? I hope today's discussions will offer up some solutions, or at least make us think long and hard about this. And now I hand over to Rachel Attard. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thanks for the intro. Before we start the discussion, I would like to point out two things. One of you obviously have mobile phones, switch them off with respect to the discussion. And secondly, I do ask you to participate. This is a discussion where basically we want to listen to even to our future generation, so we don't let just us talk, because we have a lot to say, rest your mind, but it's better to listen and rather than actually hear. Brenda, Brenda, can you hear us? Hi. I know that you have some data which you would like to share with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Somebody nod their heads. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you very much. And there are very interesting cameos and stories that came out of that. They talked in a positive way about some of their experiences around parenting and meeting family needs, family friendly commitments. But they did say that it depended specifically on whoever was in charge, very much on the response of their line manager. The biggest thing that emerged for me, and I suppose shocked me, was the working cultures in different spaces. One journalist reported it as being a macho environment. If you survive it, you survive anything. And another talked about how when she entered the newsroom, there was porn on the screen. So we've had this story repeated in social media since. It was one thing that was picked up when the story was when there was reported being reported. Another respondent who worked in the gaming sector talked about how a boys' club mentality prevailed around decision making, where deals and major decisions were happening in nightclubs and strip clubs, and that it was normal for house departments to bring their clients to such places to make them happy. So these are the kind of samples and snapshots of the prevailing masculine culture that is in place at the moment in the media sector itself. And this permeates down into then what we see as portrayed in the media. The same information is still being reported back to us when we look at women appearing. All women that I interviewed discussed the stereotypes that they're aware of. And they commented on the widespread use of the classic stereotypes, damaging stereotypes, such as the Prof bimbo, which tends to get repeated and repeated. These were all moments that people talked about, the stories that they told us. We did talk a bit about regulation, but what was interesting from all the voices, when we talked about areas for potential action and change, what we heard as a singular voice was, to achieve cultural shift, we have to start with language and awareness and legislation and enforcement. And for me, that's when the EU comes in, because for me, the EU is looking after the regulation and enforcement, and regulation drives change. When it's enforced well, regulation drives change. And we are seeing changes, but we are not seeing changes fast enough. So I'm not going to talk much more about the actual FEM study itself. I wanted to talk briefly about women's representation in politics and media. And again, I'm sure you will all be able to come back to this at a later date. When we look at female politicians, we have to pull back our right-angle lens again and think about the fact that all women in society tend to get treated the same, and female politicians are in that sector. So when we misrepresent women in the media, we also misrepresent female politicians. We do it very well. when we misrepresent female politicians. I'm being sarcastic here. Women in public life are up against a different set of rules to male politicians. It's a case of everyday sexism being played out every day. Or as Elizabeth Van Zulen says, it's an excavation of patriarchal mechanisms at work. And Van Zulen talks about the cultural model of the politician being very much around the ideas of masculinity rather than femininity. So we have a prevailing expectation of how politicians should be and how people should be in political lives. And it is a masculine model that we have in place. So when women take that, they either have to behave according to a masculine context, or they deviate and are falling into a group space. When they do that, the media picks up on it and demonizes. So masculine framing of the news may serve often to marginalize women who fail to behave as combatively as their male counterparts, as some research has found. When we look at research around women in the media as politicians and in political life, there's several spaces that we tend to get engrossed in. One is around visibility and invisibility. So where there's an absence, no reporting, and when there is reporting, what kind of reporting. So the actual coverage then being the second space, and the third being the gendered mediation that encompasses the two above. So the checklist for us when we're thinking about research in media representation of women in political life is invisible women, women attempting to, in the media, cover health and education as appropriate spaces. Journalists come up against that issue of saw from hard news. Female politicians come up against that. They're expected to operate within those sectors of health and education. The third space is always married with children. That's what we call it. Where you're always going to be defined and described according to your marital status, your non-marital status, the fact that you have children, how you talk to your children, how does your husband grow? These are all questions that women constantly get asked across Europe, globally, when we look at how women as politicians get interviewed in the media. The fourth space is style over substance. The media will invariably talk about how women look. So looksism becomes an issue. Women will be, female politicians will be commented on what they're wearing, how their hair is, what armband they have, what shoes they have. Male politicians don't get scrutinized in the same manner. The fifth space is gender speech. We tend to have the reporting of women's speech around a very particular set of discourses. Male speech tends to get reported in different ways as politicians. And the sixth space is the negative gender distinctions, frames, and metaphors that are used when the media talks about women as politicians. I'm conscious I've probably spoken longer than 5 minutes. So I'm going to hand the floor back to Rachel to open up the discussion with the panel, and I'm happy to jump in and out as we go along.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for that. And obviously, we will have you raise a number of questions out of your speech. Before we start the discussion, I'm obviously happy that there are a number of students here, especially females, who are interested in this subject. And in the panel, there is something which is interesting here, which is we have a person who made a shift from media to politics, which is Miriam. Miriam started in media and went into politics. And then we have obviously Sylvana, which spent 25 years in the media doing journalism and obviously sometimes also PR, as a PR person. So she had 2 hats as well. She wore 2 hats at different times. But the first question which I want to ask is, why should these young generation here today be interested in what Miriam, what Roberta, what Miriam, what Sylvana, what Francis, Marlene. Today, not your day, sorry. So I'll leave you up. Okay, you have the first floor, rightly so. Why should these young generation be interested in politics?
Well, not all is at least I can be heard. Okay. Not all of them are, but I think all citizens should be, in different ways. And when we say interested in politics, we're not necessarily saying interested in partisan politics, although in Malta it will be very difficult not to relate politics with two particular parties, because politics basically is part of our life, it's part of society. I mean, it's a necessary evil, if you like, for some, or it's a benefit. Politics is what makes our lives. Politics is what molds our lives. So yes, being interested in politics, and I think coming from a young age, these people here, it's a mix. It's nice to see a mix of ages, actually. But as far as the question is concerned for the young people, it's because yes, it's their future. And if politicians, pardon my French, screw up their future, then there's a problem. So yes, they should be interested in politics. And being interested in politics is not just going on Facebook and seeing what's happening, not just going online, but ideally participating in politics. Ideally,
you started in business, so you practically weren't in the media or in politics. And in your case, you came at a later stage in politics. What drives you to participate?
Okay, yes, I'm a very, very young politician of an age. I joined politics in 2009. I contested the first election in 2009. I was always interested in politics. I was always interested in what's going on, but I was particularly interested in European politics. So that's where my love was and is, rather than local. That's my first. So basically, I was enticed into politics. It is not my natural. It is not my natural habitat. I was enticed into politics by Joseph Muscat, a newly elected leader of the Labour Party. He invited me, and then you think about it, and you think of the consequences, and you think maybe because of your experience you can contribute, and you want to contribute. So that's what enticed me into politics. Nothing else for sounding kitsch is, yes, you wanted to serve your country, you wanted to do something for your country, whether you mention or not or something else.
Robert, how difficult it is for someone who is a woman, in your case you have a family, and quite a big family, we must admit as well, and you have to commute. So these are all the challenges that even Brenda in her speech now said, that we are all the time being asked, what are the challenges? So why should you be interested in politics?
Let me start by saying that if I were a man here, you would not have asked me this question. I would also be the father, in that case, of 4 young children, but I would have a partner or a mother or a grandma who would be, at the moment, as is happening today, taking care of the children while I'm here. The reason why I did this and why I do this must have started in this room. It looked a little bit different when I used to attend university. The chairs were not so polished. But I remember I sat in this room at a lecture on political theory by Professor Frigieri. And I remember thinking, look, I'm 18, nobody in my family was ever in politics. I would like to see my country join the European Union. What can I do? I didn't think about what I could have become or I would be doing only a few years later when I was a candidate for the European Parliament when I was 24 years old. But I looked at where I wanted my country to be, where my generation wanted to be, and where we thought Malta could do better, and I worked for it. I never thought about the fact that I might one day find myself every Thursday night flying down from Brussels to Malta, going back up every Sunday or Saturday, depending on political events, but also private personal events, depending on scheduling back home. What I do is I see what needs to be done, irrespective of sometimes my personal situation, and I say, I have an aim, and if with that aim I will manage to, Marlene used the word entice, I'll use it as well, entice people to whether go into politics or journalism or both, and they are not mutually exclusive, I would have done something right. Today marks the 10th year since Daphne Caruana Galizia started her blog. Today. I think it would be good for us to remember the trailblazing women in politics and in journalism in our country who have made a huge impact on our society, on our political scenario, irrespective of their private and family lives, but because they believed they wanted to do something right. If you look back at our history, you realize that in the 15 or 16 general elections that we've had in Malta, since women got the vote, 80 women have been candidates. You look at Agata Barbara, who ran for 10 times, trailblazer in her own world and in her own way. In our party, Anna Giusfarante ran for the first woman candidate in 1980, for the PM. In comparison, 1,000 men have run for elections in these 15 or 16 general elections. It goes to show how far away we still are, but hopefully today, the reason why we were laughing is because when Anna showed us the graph, we thought that Francis must have brought us down a little bit, but we're very happy at this year, extremely happy, but he actually brings gender equality into it, to the 50%. But the reason why we said that is because we are here to actually show to everybody in the room or watching us that if you want to do something, you do it irrespective of how difficult it might be at home, but because you believe in what you want to achieve for your country.
Miriam, you, as I said earlier, you were a journalist and then you went into politics. In these years that you've been both as a journalist and as a politician, how did you see this whole transformation, or was there a transformation?
That was going to be my answer. Is there a transformation? Because really and truly, I mean, if I had to look both at journalism and also the political scene, I'm really disappointed at what's happening, because Anna at one point mentioned the percentages that we got regarding female representation in the European Parliament, and I remember myself sitting in discussions like this and everyone giving us the impression that, you see, it's happened, and now this is a natural path that this country is taking, and we'll see this happening over and over again. And I was skeptical from day one, because we're speaking about 6 MEPs, and just one MEP, and here, Francis, that's what we were laughing about, but honestly, it's no laughing matter, because we're speaking about 6 MEPs, 1 MEP makes all the difference. So really and truly, it is not an example of what's happening in society, and we saw this in the general election. If you look at the females representing us in Parliament today, out of 67 MPs, we only have 10 members of Parliament. We are saying that we have around 15% of female representatives in our Parliament. Back in 1950, it's 14.9% to be precise, because whilst I was coming here, I was calculating. I was kind of curious. I'm like, seriously, in 1950, we had 10% female representatives in our Parliament, 70 years ago. And in 70 years, we go up 4%. I mean, is this the country that
last general election
we want to live in? Exactly, but then if we had to look at the composition of the Parliament as it stands today, it's 14.9%. Come on, let's be generous. It's 14.9%, which is, very low. It puts us among the European EU countries. We are the ones before last. I mean, I don't want my country to be the one before last when it comes to female representation. And someone asked the question, what do women bring to politics? I mean, what do men bring to politics? With all due respect, what do men bring to politics? We are all human beings. Whatever a man brings to politics, I can bring to politics. I have a different perspective, but society is diverse, and I expect that Parliament and people who devise our policies would be diverse as well. Because if we really and truly want politicians to represent society, they need to be diverse as much as society is. If I may, on journalism. I was the first female news editor for television. I was the second radio news editor. Sylvana was the first, because I remember that. Was it easy? Not at all. I mean, it was, as Brenda was saying, it was a male-dominated environment, and I came into journalism much later than Carmen did. It was still a male-dominated environment. I would say it is still a male-dominated environment today. Things are changing there, but they're not changing as fast as I would like them to see either, because even if we see how newsrooms are composed, if you see, I was seeing recently, I don't want to go into politics, but I was seeing the newsroom of the Moment, Nazione, they were all male. I mean, if I had to look maybe at other newsrooms, it would be the same. But this example just cropped up in mind. All male. And then we are, you know, surprised that women politicians are objectified on media. It comes as no surprise.
I must admit that the Independent have 4 female and 2 male.
Good, and I'm happy to see you because you're in the lead of the newspaper, and you know that is an example to follow. And it shouldn't be just a one-off. It should be something that we see happening in different newsrooms.
Francis, Beata fra le donne, insomma, when you listen to what Marlene, Roberta, and Miriam were saying, and also from Brenda's presentation, you've been in politics for quite a while. When you listen to them, I must tell you this, I must ask you this, you feel new politicians failed?
I believe to the extent that we have not been able to encourage more women to participate, you could say that we failed. Now, I have certainly always upheld the value that there must be more women participating. I believe there has been a study in Malta which actually relates the number of members of parliament elected in the national parliament, percentage-wise, to the percentage of candidates who stood for election. And practically you end up with a perfect equation. And I state that as a first point because I think our first duty, therefore, is to really encourage and facilitate far more women to be candidates. Let me also share with you a process that I have gone through within the Nationalist Party when I was asked just over 4 years ago to chair a committee dealing with statute changes. And we were trying to begin to address, now it's, I would say, beginning of a journey, by no means complete, to have more women in decision-making roles. And one way to address that would be, obviously, to have a more balanced executive committee of the party. Now, we had a system whereby when people vote through the General Council of the party for the executive, there was a kind of quota system, kind of 4 guaranteed seats. And we said to ourselves in conducting the process of amendments of the statute, is that the best way to do it? The best way to do it would be to have an equal number elected, women and men. But the best way to do it also is not to go through a quota system, but actually to have an election for 9 men, for 9 women, and in both elections, all councillors vote. Because at the end of the day, men need to have a say about who are the women there, and women need to have a say about who are the men there. And that was a first in political terms. And we did similar, I don't want to, obviously, if I go back into what was being done and with statute changes and trying to increase the participation of women. And I am referring very much to your question, have we failed? Well, we did that, but we need to do far more. And on the basis of the study that I have quoted, that practically equates number of women elected to percentage-wise, to percentage of women who stand for the election process, and Roberta referred to this process as well over all these years, then maybe this is our first duty, because political decision-making is that far more complete when we really respect the gender issue very thoroughly and on an equal basis. Until we do that, it's a process which is warped. I mean, you have percentages which simply do not reflect the population structure. You have a decision-making process which is not complete for another reason, because you have a perspective, you have an input that is not reflected enough in the decision-making process. Now, we are talking about politics, but this should apply also to company structures, to decision-making processes in general, and certainly to media. Let me add one thought about media, which to me is crucial. As far as I am concerned, when we talk about media, it is not only a matter of percentages. That is obviously very, very important. And we need to look at it at the various decision-making levels. The level of management, the board level, the middle management level, the newsroom level, journalistic level. All those are very important. But there is another perspective which is relating to how are women projected in the media. And we need to take proactive measures to ensure that certain old and hackneyed stereotyping of women, of their roles in media, needs to be addressed very proactively. Because that in turn is very counterproductive to having proper and correct women participation in various levels of society. So when we talk about media, I think we also need to go into not merely percentages of women in various roles, but we need to go into the issue of portrayal, issue of perspective, and issue of even which news stories need to be promoted equally with others, or in some cases even over and above others.
Thank you very much. Sylvana, I must admit that today it's a bit of a test for me, because there are three of my mentors in the room. Sylvana is one of them, Carmen is another one, and there was Dr. Kataya, I can't see her, there she is. So, yes, it's a bit of a challenge for me. Sylvana, you've been 25 years in journalism, and you've seen journalism evolving and developing in its own way. However, you and I speak often, and we say that basically the industry itself is not attracting enough female journalists. Why do you think this is happening?
It's not attracting enough journalists, period. I think that we are passing through a phase where people expect, first of all, I noticed that many people live in echo chambers. We talk about instant information, about the facilities which the social media has given us to become journalists ourselves, the whole of gatekeeping, all these big words. Fine, that could be an advantage. But not if you unfriend every person who has an opinion against you. That means that you're living basically in what technically is called an echo chamber. I think that at present, I am noticing at least two trends. One is an intolerance of a diverse opinion. And secondly, a feeling that, oh, I'll have it already made for me. It comes easy, nothing comes easy. Hello, big news. After your 6th failed interview, you will start realizing that you need to pull your socks up. And nothing comes easy. And whether you're a man or a woman, journalism is not for the faint-hearted. Meaning, at the moment, in the newsroom, we're lucky. Apart from the fact that we are 5 full-time women against 2 full-time men in the newsroom, and currently I have the added problem of gender imbalance in the whole organization, because we are more men than women. Perhaps that's why it's success as well. But that was a bit of a sexist. Which I may be forgiven. The problem is that we are lucky at my place of work. I have what I define, and I say to them, I use this word, 2 chihuahuas, because at the moment they're chihuahuas. They will graduate into becoming pit bulls. But at the moment you need tenacity. You need to not look at your watch and say, it's time for me to go home because it's 5 o'clock. There's a story, it's breaking, you have to do it. And whether you're a man or a woman, this thing in a newsroom, it's there. A newsroom, you only know one thing in a newsroom, the time you're going to go in. The time you're going to go out, perhaps. eventually, you will know. I remember I was speaking this morning to a friend of mine, and I recall the time. I remember it was 8 in the evening, 20 to 8 to be precise, and I'll tell you why this precision. I was supposed to have left at 5. My bag was on the table, and I was like saying, oh, thank God it's over. And then it was the time when Princess Diana's body was being taken from Kensington Palace to St. James, because the next day was going to be the funeral of Princess Diana. So that's the exact context. CNN was broadcasting, that was not the time when there was Facebook, and a crawl came up on CNN, Mother Teresa dies. Now you have to bear in mind that I work at RTK, so for us, Mother Teresa, for everyone, Mother Teresa, but for us particularly, and I remember, all I did was, I just put the bag down. There was only one computer which had internet, which was my computer. I opened it up again, went into internet, Mother Teresa, in search engine, I don't remember what it was, I think it was Yahoo at the time, and a couple of lines came up after some time, printed those, 7:45, breaking news. By 8 o'clock, I had phoned my boss. He came over, he parked his then ailing father onto a chair. 6 words were spoken. By 9 o'clock, we brought up a program which lasted for an hour, interviewing people all over, calling here, calling there. And we brought up a one-hour program. I had been at work at that point for 14 hours. Today, if somebody spends 14 hours at work, normally they make me feel like I should give them the Jihera Publica or something like that. I mean, it's not, believe you me, if you want to be successful in life, it's not the case. The ladies and gentlemen here know what it means. All of them have spent up to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, woken up 2 hours later, had a quick shower, probably pinned their eyelids up like that with some toothpick or something. Hard work will always pay off.
Brenda, I wanted to ask you, Brenda, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Brenda, throughout the years, political parties in Malta have always been urged to step up their recruitment to women candidates. However, in Malta, the most recent data shows that less than a third of the government decision makers are women, with only 30% of the 264 decision makers in the civil service being women. What does this tell you?
It tells us what we've been saying for the last hour, that we're working within a very particular culture, and I don't mean Malta as a culture, I mean a political culture that is global to a large extent, and has its own variances and nuances in the Maltese context. We know that it's difficult for women to become decision makers for lots of reasons. Some of the reasons are our own self-policing, or the environment that we've grown up in, which doesn't encourage this kind of putting ourselves forward to become decision makers. But also we know that there are other mechanisms in place, such as the sticky floor, the glass ceiling. And we glibly throw those terms around. We talk about the glass ceiling and the sticky floor, and as if to explain away something. But these are very, very particular mechanisms that are continuing to hold women behind their desks in one role instead of moving forward into another. And it's about perceptions of line managers, it's about self-perceptions, it's about exposure to training and encouragement. There's lots of different variables and reasons for it. I know that when we talk in general around the decision making in the civil service on the broader sense, when we narrow that back down to women decision making in news organisations or women taking on political life, which is what political life is. It's women being willing to be decision makers and putting themselves out there. I know that we have had slight shifts in the way we're seeing solutions. And we had Fiona Buckley over here a couple of weeks ago with the department talking about quotas. And I know I'm going to mention the Q word and cause lots of people to run screaming from the room. And she gave the example of how the Irish political system has transformed in terms of representation of candidates on the ticket for elections as a result of a campaign, a very effective campaign called the 50-50 campaign, which a group of women activists propelled coming up to the last elections in Ireland. And what they managed to get into place was a set of legislative statements which meant that parties had to, for this last election, run a 30% female candidates on the ballot on the ticket. The next set of general elections that come around, or elections that come around, run 40%, and the next set of elections will be 50%. And one of the interesting things that I took away from Fiona Buckley's presentation and discussion was that it was really about semantics. When we think about quotas in order to resolve the decision-making in ballots, a lot of people get uncomfortable because we immediately start to talk about meritocracies as a nice smokescreen for what it's worth. And she urged us to rethink the word, because semantics and semiotics are really important. And instead of calling it quotas, let's call them strategies for ensuring gender equality, because they don't sound half as problematic when we think about them in those terms.
Yeah.
And I think we do have to really embrace this. We have to look at a way where we can realistically bring about physical changes with bums on seats, so that women can be sitting at the boardroom tables, women can be willing to go out into political life and take on those roles, because we've put mechanisms into place such as quotas or mechanisms for ensuring gender equality, and all of the other things that are required alongside, such as training. For example, in Ireland, a lot of female politicians talked about their discomfort of going in front of camera. And so an organisation was set up to train women who wish to go into public life to get used to talking on camera and training them in order to do that. So there's lots of things that we can do to realistically bring about change. We have to get the chocolate really clear in our heads first, and then act on it.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to have a comment from Francesca Feneconti, who is with us. Francesca, I know that you have a Facebook group which is very, very popular and very active as well. It's called Women for Women. And yesterday, while I was preparing for this discussion, I did a very small, quick research. I went on your Facebook page, and I went on the European Parliament Facebook page, and I went on stories on the media, both on our portals, our news portals, where they were basically promoting this particular discussion that we're having today. You had only 2 comments on that someone's comment. Media's, in general, people were not engaged in a discussion. And I realized that we're basically doing something wrong even on the social media, even though we're there. People are not interested in basically engaging or sharing ideas. What's your take on this?
I'm very bad at public speaking. I'm one of those women that needs a training. I really don't know what we're doing wrong. I think it's still the stereotypes. That's what I try to do through Women for Women, is break the stereotype and try to bring all the parties together to fight for women's rights, because as I really believe in mechanisms for gender equality and for representation, which I find that now, unfortunately, it's become politicized as well, the quota system, which I really believe in. We need more women to speak out, we need more women to be here. I tried to tell my friends to come, but they all had many more important things to do for some reason. And I don't know what we're doing wrong. I mean, I'm really trying to break stereotypes. I'm always trying to give women voices. but they quickly shut down as well on social media, which is my chosen media, especially if you have diverse opinions, which are not the mainstream ones. You're shut down mostly by men, and it's you have to have a thick skin and a hard shell to continue at it, or else you're quickly shut down. And I'm sure many of the women, I can see them nodding their heads, they know what I mean. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
I don't know if the panel or anyone in the audience would like to comment about this, but I've noticed as well, because you just mentioned stereotypes. So we've been in this whole campaign. I've been in journalism for 16 years, and I was like all the time saying we need to promote women, we need to voice their opinions. But on the other hand, we still have stereotypes. And incidentally, even social media is creating this by even looking at recent examples and recent court judgments that were given because a sexist comment, a horrible comment was passed because a female politician, public person spoke. So it's like we're perceiving the social media as being an extension of our living room. We can say whatever we want without really seeing the repercussions. What can we do to basically counteract this whole stereotype? Maybe even Dr. Kutaya can give us her views about this. She's next to you.
Nitkellem bil-Malti. Stereotypes għandna ħafna mhux biss fuq in-nisa, għandna r-reġjuni ta' Malta, stereotypes li huma li għandhom x'jaqsmu magħhom. Issa aħna qegħdin f'istituzzjoni li ġiet krijata mill-irġiel għall-irġiel. Biex jidħlu fija rridu nagħmlu ċerti miżuri biex in-nisa jħossuhom komdi. U jekk taqgħod tara x'qed jiġri f'pajjiżi barra minn Malta, biex żgur ma jkunx hemm repercussions fuq in-nisa, qed jagħmlu paid parental leave kemm għan-nisa u kemm għall-irġiel biex kif qalu l-speakers ikun hemm equitable sharing ta' responsabiltajiet. Inkella jekk aħna maħniex se nagħmlu miżuri biex in-nisa u l-irġiel jkollhom l-istess stance fil-labor market se jkun hemm repercussions jekk aħna ħandaħlu kwoti pereżempju. Ġifieri aħna mhux ġast issue waħda rridu nittakiljaw, imma different issues biex naslu għal ċerti stance. Issa stereotype xi tfisser bihom. Inti tista' tfal tiegħek tipprova trawwamhom biex dan l-stereotypes ma jidħlux f'moħħhom. U mbagħad jaraw it-television, jisimgħu il-sħabhom. Biex nirribattu l-stereotypes irridu ikollna kampanji diversi. U mbagħad nara jien mill-istudenti tagħna. Iż-żgħar, għax hawnhekk hawn ħafna studenti, iż-żgħar qishom ħasbu li l-egwaljanza diġà l-ħaqnija. U mbagħad ikolli n-nisa maturi, għandna t-tnejn għandna kors. Kieku taf kemm ikun hemm diskussjonijiet interessanti wara bġiet minnhom. Bejn is-studenti li għadhom fil-20 u l-istudenti l-maturi. Għax l-istudenti maturi jaqbdu l-ek it-teorija. Jgħidu karak, din kemm tapplika għal ħajti. L-istudenti żgħar it-teorija ma jistgħux applikawha għal ħajjithom għax ma bdewx jesperjenzaw daqshekk id-diskriminazzjoni fil-ħajja tax-xogħol jew fil-ħajja f'pubblika għax m'għandhomx responsabiltajiet daqskemm għandhom in-nisa ta' ċertu età ħalli jkun hawn minn żgħir u jkun diġà beda bir-responsabiltajiet. Jien naħseb jiena l-istereotipi nibdew nkissruhom x'in aħna nibdew nitnikżu f'ħajjitna stess. Hemmhekk nibdew nindunaw l-istereotipi x'effett għandu fuq il-ħajja tagħna.
Thank you. Nafli għaw xie mistoqsijiet. Thank you.
Hi, I just have a few comments about the entire debate in general. So, I'd like to start with two things. First, they were speaking inside the university echo chamber, which was used, a bubble inside the university where there are different values, different norms, and especially with students, we learn how to respect each other. And that's the word we need to use, respect. It's not about women's rights, it's not about men's rights. And I know many people would disagree with me. It's about respecting people as people. And that's what comes in Malta in general. The mentality is in that Malta, women should be behind the desk. unfortunately, it's still a big mentality that women should be at home. It's a big thing. It's a big problem that comes. Women are vilified. They're broken down. They're treated as objects. And fortunately, yes, there has been a lot of changes, especially with the youths which are growing up, at least my generation. There's a big change. But what example can we get when people who are in power, who are in positions, either are they themselves doing these vilifications almost, treating women as nothing, or when you go for a job, they tell you, okay, you're a woman, you get paid less, or you get different conditions. That guy, he's a guy, he's better. Or even people who are in Parliament sometimes, accidentally, or even not accidentally, do things which they have no repercussions for, and they take nothing. They just do it, whatever. And they're there representing us. We should be taking them as an example. That's why people don't go into politics. That's why people don't go into media. It's not women, it's people, because people don't want to participate in this. They say, it doesn't affect me, I don't want to be part of it. I understand women are much less represented, and that is a big problem. But the problem is not fixed with quotas. The problem is fixed with teaching people to respect each other from a young age. The problem is fixed with having people growing up in the right environment that ħanitkellem bil-Malti. Jekk nikbru naraw in-nisa jridu jisajru, jridu wara x-xogħol, jridu mur jixtru l-affarijiet biex niklu, ir-raġel joqgħod bil-qiegħda d-dar. I'm not saying this is the environment that everyone's growing in, but it's the environment a lot of people are growing in, especially in these people that don't speak out, because they don't care, because this is their life, this has been their life, and it will be their life. They don't question it. And that is the thing I think we should be tackling. Sorry for the long comment.
Jena bil-maqlub ma nafx nisem ta' jena, I'm a strong believer in quotas. U ħanajta għax naħseb li vera rridu nibdlu il-kultura, vera, l-istereotipi, eccetera, but jena nistennew 70 sena, f'70 sena ma ċaqlaq kważi xejn. U now, the English expression would be that we need to shake the tree. Rridu nagħmlu xi ħaġa biex nagħtu spinta. Fil-verità, teoristi u nies li jikru fuq il-politika jgħidulek illi biex l-affarijiet jimxu b'mod naturali u jimxu b'mod waħedhom, kif konna qed nistennew s'issa, irid ikollok critical mass ta' 30%. Aħna għadna bot ħafna biex nilħu il-30%. Il-moment li jkollok 30% tan-nisa pożizzjonijiet fejn tgħidu deċiżjonijiet fil-ħajja politika, fil-ħajja ekonomika, għax ma rridux ninsew li għandek nuqqas ta' nisa fejn jidħlu tmexxija ta' kumpaniji, il-boardroom biex ngħidu hemm. Sakemm ma leħqux dawn il-30% ħajkun diffiċli ferm biex jinbidlu l-affarijiet. U nemmen fil-kwoti ikunu rridu nħarsu lejn sistemi ta' kwoti differenti. Francis Zammit Dimech semma sistema ta' separate list li juża l-Partit Nazzjonalista, dik hija sistema ta' kwoti wkoll. Għax hemm numri, hemm sistemi differenti ta' kwoti. Sakemm ma nużawx bħala miżura temporanja biex inċaqalqu l-affarijiet, naħseb li l-incumbents jibqgħu hemm. Ħalli ngħid xi ħaġa fuq l-MEPs, fuq il-membri parlamentari, għax nofshom kienu nisa u aħna Malta qegħdin għandi top of the list. U kif qalet Miriam DALLI, jekk jonqos wieħed jew tnejn f'daqqa waħda niġu, jiġri aħna tant għandna numru żgħir li jaffettwa l-persentat. Issa, jekk inħarsu lejn l-MEPs, aħna konna sa 5-6 snin ilu ma kien hemm ħadd nisa. Kellek kandidati ta' kwalità tajba ħafna. Fl-opinjoni tiegħi kienu l-aħjar kandidati għall-MEPs. Imma fil-verità, in-nisa daħlu fil-Parlament Ewropew għall-ewwel darba bil-casual elections. Meta kellek l-incumbents li kien ilhom hemm li ġew lura Malta biex jidħlu fix-xena politika. Naħseb li Roberta anzi ħadd post Simon Busuttil, Marlene u l-istess ġurnata ħadet post Joseph Muscat, u mbagħad kien hemm ċikluna u xi ħadd ieħor minn Claudette flok. Ġifieri dawn daħlu, so they broke the ceiling at that point, mbagħad il-glass ceiling, u wara meta saru huma incumbents setgħu jiġġieldu għal qassiġġijiet tagħhom. U minn hemmhekk il-qudiem ma kienx hemm bżonn waħedhom bdew jieħdu l-pożizzjonijiet. Jiena naħseb li f'diversi osma anke fil-partiti stess dew jidħlu miżuri biex ikollok il-30% fl-eżekuttivi, eċetera.
ma li ntlaħqet dik il-kwota għas kien hemm bżonn aktar għax in-nies bdew jidrawlu ċom il-buġġijiet tagħhom u awtomatikament imbagħad il-kwota ma kienx hemm bżonna. Imma jekk nibqgħu għaddejjin u ħanħallu noqogħdu nistennew, jiena nkun miġbur. Naħseb li anke intom tkunu jew wasaltu fl-aħħar jew kellha forsi tfal tagħkom jibdew jaraw l-affarijiet jiċċaqalqu. 70 sena ta' storja mill-50 law ma wasalna assolutament imkien. Issa rridu nħarsu lejn modelli, l-Irlanda hija modell interessanti li nħarsu lejh għaliex għandhom single transferable vote bħal manna aħna. Pajjiżi oħra għandhom sistemi elettorali differenti, allura forsi ma jkunux jixirqu, imma l-Irlandiżi ma li daħlu l-kwoti awtomatikament minn 13-14% f'daqqa waħda telaw għal 23%, jiġifieri kien hemm mal-ewwel beda jinħass l-impatt. Ma rridx nieħu aktar ħin
Good morning, Anna Fenech, one of Josen's Monday's headaches. Nixtieq nidħol fil-kuntest lokali. I would like to comment on the local context. Why I think that women do not participate. With all due respect to all the MEPs, I think the scenario in Europe is totally different. I personally think that we lack a lot of respect towards our own politicians in Malta. And basically, if I were to contest an election in Malta, it is me who wants to go into politics. It's not my family, it's not my daughter, it's not my husband. I mean, I was in a private company, I was in the management of a private company. My family never brought into it. Now, let's go into the politics here. In the quota, Dr. Luciano Busuttin, only last week he said it, we are prostitutes for our constituents. It's a very, very strong statement. Kemm hawn irġiel li huma kapaċi jagħmluha insaqsu, kemm hawn nisa li lesti jagħmlu għall-familja tagħhom ikissru, idaħħlu l-familja tagħhom daqshekk fit-disrispett li hawn lejn il-politiċi hawn Malta. Another thing that really, really shakes me is the pay. It's a paltry pay. 21,000 a year for a member of parliament. Għax il-parlament huwa magħmul għall-avukati. Kienu koll avukati irġiel, it was a part-time job for them, 7 o'clock in the evening, they see to their clients, they go to parliament. It's okay because it's a part-time job. What if we take it as a full-time job for women? Another thing I want to point out is... imma sallum, imma sfortunatament sallum kienet ċaħal nisa, ma kien nisa ħajġu full-time fil-parlament. At that pay, jekk il-partit fil-gvern se jitkellem fuq il-pagi, ħana għala wixxu fenomenali, għana nitkellem fuq flus. Yes, at 21,000, it's not a good pay. With all due respect to everybody. Fuq il-program tal-lead, konti preferi li kukun għara dak il-program on a national basis, nifemilja idea tal-Partit Laburista, u ovvjament imma ħajkonna 50% members of parliament il-Partit Laburista u il-Partit Nazjonalista le. L-ewwel interess nazzjonali ma kienx ikun aħjar li kien un program nerġa' ngħid ma nifhimx fil-istrateġija tagħha kif issir. Però yes, bħala ċittadina kont nippreferixxi li nagħtu push lin-nisa nazzjonali.
Thank you very much. Kienu xagħtihom bella għaddi għal-pella għax naffi li titkellem.
Hi, Luisa Vassallo. Sorry, I want to speak in English because I know there are foreigners here. I used to work in a media organization. I was the manager of a media organization on a multi-platform. I want to make a few points. Women in media is not just women in journalism. It's women in all levels, the crew, the management, okay, journalists as well, the way they are portrayed, actors, presenters, discussion programs. A lot of our discussion programs are, the visual is men in suits, unfortunately. We have more women participating, but we're still lacking there as well. Also, the way they are portrayed in drama, which is very popular. Because at the end of the day, if women in drama, and I'm not saying this, I have no scientific evidence, but if the women are portrayed as stereotypes in a lot of these dramas, that's a problem. So having more women, I'm going to go to quotas here, because there are two things which bother me about the way gender issues are discussed. One of the phrases that really bothers me is when someone pipes up and sometimes women say that women are their own worst enemies, which is not true. It's not true. The system is. Secondly, is when women are against quotas. I have, with all due respect to all the men here, with all due respect to women who maybe haven't I am very much in favor of quotas, and I have no problem calling them quotas, because there's been positive discrimination in the other direction for all our lives. You know, it's been happening. So why not have representation the other way around? You know, the structures don't help. As a manager, I had to work much harder than other people. After I left, I found out there was a pay gap, which I was not even aware of. If there were other women, maybe, who were in my position, I would have been able to negotiate from a position of strength, because there is strength in numbers. So I really want women, and I'm appealing to women and men, to be in favor of quotas and to speak up. It's not a dirty word. It's something that we really, really need. What's wrong with having equal representation? Okay, let's call it that. But we have to stop saying, I'm not sure if I'm in favor of quotas, because there are so many incompetent men, with all due respect, in politics, in media. I've seen it. Only because they are men, they get that position. And I'm not a man-hater, please, I want to be clear on this. But there are a lot of incompetent men, you know? And it's because they accidentally fall into that position because they were given priority. There are quotas in other things, in racism, in situations like that. People don't seem to have a problem with that. When it comes to gender, women have to perform 4 times as much, even as politicians, as presenters, as management. We have to somehow prove ourselves, and we have to even deal with the imposter syndrome. Because as women, we are brought up. I was brought up in a sexist generation, where women drivers got yelled at because they're women, you know? Where women weren't expected to be politicians, which I heard more that I was subject to sexist speech when I worked. And unfortunately, I worked at Media Link, which is the PN news. I have very fond memories. I had great teams, I had of men and women, and it pains me as well today, unfortunately, to see that all the decision makers are men, and I appeal to it. It's still an organization I love very much. I'm not having a dig, but I know there are a lot of capable women in that organization, so why aren't they making the decisions? Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. We might get our account on Zammit.
Brown, I'm a sociology and I'm also a lead candidate. Basically, I wanted to point out also the element of intersectionality, because sometimes we tend to put all women in the same basket, but we are all very different. And I think there is a lot of research that needs to be done also to see who are the women that are reaching the top positions and who are the women who are left behind, not just in politics and the media, but also in academia, for example. There is a lot of selective, subtle, very subtle sexism that is also mixed with different characteristics. Because we have stereotypes, yes, we have been mentioning them. There are a lot of stereotypes also for the female academic, the female politician, the female media or public person. I think that's very important. And I have a lot of respect for Francesca Fenech's work and on social media. However, I would like also to point out that being here is by no means a measure of being in favor of women's participation. I mean, women who had that breaking news and had to stay at their place of work, whether they are nurses or teachers in the classroom or mothers standing to their children at home or to their household chores, that was that breaking news that had to keep them there, and they are still practicing every day at different moments of their lives what they need to do at that moment in time. They are there and they have to do it. So I am one of the people who attended this debate, and I am happy to be here and proud to be here, but I know that many women are doing it out there all the time in many other places and in filling many other roles.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Dorikins. I've known you in different fields, in media, and also I teach media in Atankas, and here I can see most of my students are female, and in the creative media, as the lady mentioned, if we do not address the issue now, the gender pay gap, when they are working the same jobs, the same level of meritocracy, the females in the industry will get less money. So we have to think about our future as well financially here. We're not talking about rights. You know, we need to know that our students will get the same level of work entitlement as their male counterparts, because some are going to be working in the same level as well. So it's not just because there are many laws or regulations as well. We need laws and regulations. In Iceland, for example, the gender pay gap does not exist. They have a law now that there cannot be any difference in their wages. So I can see, I don't know about the quota, I am ambivalent about this. I still have to decide, but I don't know the stand of the government into this. So I really would like to know.
Okay. The last question before I take now the panel. National Council for Women. Mary.
Thank you. Well, there's a lot to speak about, but I'll try and be as brief as possible. I've heard all of you speak, and one of the questions that's come to mind is, what do the political parties, how do they entice? Because Marlene spoke about enticing women to go into politics, and Roberta said as well. So what are political parties doing? Miriam is leading the lead, so involving the young women. Something. What?
And older ones.
And older ones as well. Okay. And this brings me on to something else. It is true, when you enter politics or when you go in the political arena, you are not prepared. Who is preparing them? That is so crucial, because you are not prepared. If you fail, if you are not elected, many a time, they do not recontest the election because they are not prepared to take the failure. So we need to train them. The political parties need to train them. What better a place than here? You have all the young people. Who is training them? Who is training them not to accept stereotyping? Who is training them? I believe in quotas. We believe in quotas. Whatever form it takes. Because as it happened with the MEPs, they got there and they stayed there. So we need to that little push to take them out and put them there. What about local politics? Not the members of parliament. Take the local councils. Why are women there in more numbers than they are in parliament? What is stopping them then in moving on to parliament? These are the things we need to know. These are the things we need to study, so that we will remove those barriers and then make it easier for them to take that step. I'll stop.
Thank you very much. I know that you would probably want to comment on some of the issues, but Anna here made a reference for a question that I would like to ask. Should we start thinking of a time where basically politics should become a full-time job, where you are trained, it's a profession, and not basically, because ultimately even society itself needs good politicians. You avoid corruption, you avoid people who are not responsible at their job. I don't know. Yeah, Zoe, Mike, Miriam or Roberta, whoever.
I mean, you attract new people as well, because I'm sure that if it is a full-time job and there is a good salary for it, and it has to be agreed by all parties, because I do understand also what Anna referred to, that no party on its own would probably take up an issue as to give all MEPs a full-time job with a highly paid salary, so there needs to be agreement about that. And it would be something which would attract new blood. It would attract valid persons, because really and truly, there are loads of people out there I speak to, and I'm sure my colleagues speak to as well, who would be interested to go into politics, who have a family, men and women, and who would tell you that, I have a profession, I have a family, I have a good salary, why would I go into politics if it's not a full-time job, if it does not pay that well? You know what, a minister gets, how much do they get? I don't know. 44. Someone who works, who has a profession, or someone who has a good paid job, they get much more than that. So there needs to be also balance, and there needs to be irrid ikun hemm il-sens, jagħmel sens. If I'm going from one profession to politics, I need to have something which I can rely on also financially. If I may, are these the last comments? Because there are a couple of issues that I could... Can I just quickly 3 things? We are mentioning quotas. I, for one, would put hand on heart, say mea culpa, and I'll tell you why. 1 year, 6 months ago, I remember I was here, there was an event by Jeff, they asked us about quotas, and I was a bit like, a bit tiffy. I was like, but we need to be, aware of tokenism, etc. Today, 1 year, 6 months later, I say, that was really a stupid comment from my end. Because honestly, nothing is happening, and we need to do something. And let's start discussing seriously, because this quota thing comes up when 8th of March approaches. And then, it dies down again. So let's start speaking about this on a long-term discussion to see actually something happening. And there are loads of different measures. There are soft quotas, there are hard quotas, there are positive measures. Different countries take different initiatives, but we are always, staying a step back, actually, let's not touch the quota debate. I say, guys, let's touch the quota debate, let's see what would work for our country and what can make actually a difference, and start discussing it properly to actually change things, because otherwise, nothing is going to happen. 70 years, nothing happened, and nothing will happen in our lifetime. Quickly, two other things that were mentioned. You mentioned the LEAD program, Anna mentioned LEAD program as well. I would like to see the LEAD program going on a national level platform, but there have to be political willingness from all sides. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that political willingness. LEAD was in the eye of the storm, and the criticism was that these people are being trained to look good and cosmetic. So, with all due respect, if we objectify persons who want to go into politics, no one will go into politics, because that narrative is making people come out on social media. And I'll tell you one comment on my Facebook page when we are speaking about LEAD in Maltese. In-nisa tajbin biss, as-sodda u l-kċina. Alright? And that is the narrative that we are encouraging with this political things that we are pushing. So with all due respect, let's make a national debate. Let's make it non-partisan and something which makes sense, because ultimately we want to see proper representation from our politicians coming from the PN, coming from the Labour Party. I come from the Labour Party. I want to see 50% candidates, female and male, from the Labour Party. I want to see 50% male and female candidates in the National Party and in all the other parties. There are capable people, all right? So if we actually make a discussion which is non-partisan and which actually would help society at large, everyone would benefit from it.
We have just given 16-year-olds the vote. I think we need to look at those 14-year-olds today, girls and boys, and see in 4 years' time whether they would have voted in the next election and whether some of them would be willing to become candidates. I might say something controversial now, but it is much easier for you to be a candidate when you are young than 20 years later, when you have a house loan, you have family commitments, you have financial commitments, and it will be almost impossible for you to enter unless you have the financial resources and you have support at home. Francesca mentioned the dialogue on social media, Women for Women, etc. I also looked at those Facebook page, and one thing that struck me, Francesca, is the difference in the women that comment in that page, as opposed to the women that comment on "Are you being served?", where the numbers are much larger and the contestations are much more varied and much more loud and vociferous, so to speak. If you are in politics today, the reality is that we are called whores, we are called you should be burnt at the stake, if you see her, please run her over. These are the things that appear on my Facebook page. If I say something that is politically pointed, I could easily spend my time as a politician writing fluffy posts, but I refuse to do that. I was not elected to do this. I was elected to take difficult decisions. Now, if I spend my time in the European Parliament dealing with migration, terrorism, security, a predominantly male, usually dominated subject, we need to be able to say, listen, yes, there are women who can do it. And it's not an issue that we are women, it's not an issue that we are candidates together with men working for a platform in accordance with your values and principles. Now, Mary, you said something and also Carmen said something. It's true, maybe we can have a look at the fact that power of incumbency in our electoral system matters, right? A lot of people who get elected once find it easier to get elected again if you do the right thing than if you are a new candidate. I myself could see that. It took me 3 times to run for the European Parliament, and 9 years for me to get elected. But once I got elected, 1 year later, I was the PM candidate with the most votes. And it was not because I was a woman, but because there was a recognition of the fact that you can have candidates, irrespective of their gender, to do the work. Now, on quotas, and here I have a slightly nuanced view, and please bear with me, let me say it, and I will be quick. Let's make a difference between having and doing all you can to have as many candidates as possible on the list, 30, 40, 50%. Well, I do not want us to have a situation where a woman gets elected to a post that would otherwise go to a man because that man would have gotten more votes. I think that will mean that every time that woman speaks, because she would have gotten 80 votes and a man she took the place of would have got 100, the second thought in one's mind would be, but she's there because she's a woman. I don't want that. I want us to have the cultural and mental shift in our society. That it no longer is an issue whether somebody in front of you who is running for a managerial post, who is in, or is just a crew member in the media, or is a candidate for a political party, that the issue is, look, can I make sure that I remove gender out of the equation and I make sure that the person there is the most qualified? And I agree with what you've said about the way current structures are, and I think that we should do more. In the European Commission, for example, a lot of efforts are being made to make sure that at the Director General position and Director's position, you have as many men as women. And a lot of effort is going through, but it is going through after a 10-year program, okay, which ensures that there are as many women candidates for the position as men. And once you have that, you end up with more women getting elected and getting appointed to positions. It's not easy. I think we should do much more, call them strategies, call them quotas, etc. But let's not fall into a situation where we have to, as women in any position, have to justify the reason why we were chosen. I would like that not to be an issue. Louise, let me just refer to one thing, and you can come in. Josiane Camilleri, who now works for RTK, was a female journalist with NET who went to cover the Libya crisis. She was one of those situations, where we could say, look, we have a woman journalist who's there in the middle of a conflict. I remember people saying, wow, għal-fejde. Għax probablement Louise l-barta. Yes, exactly. But at least we can look at those examples and use them more, and you can use them and make sure that we use them as a solution to the problems that we have. But we have to make it, again, in a non-partisan, cross-party effort to make sure that there are more women represented everywhere, with more, as many methods as we can think of.
I think I need to address a couple of issues that have come up here. One, with regard to the question of should MPs in the National Parliament be full-time. I totally agree. For one basic reason, if not for others, because the political commitments of members of Parliament now at the National Parliament level are not what they used to. We cannot deem Parliament having to work in the same way that it used to work. What would be our first national legislature? We would have to go back to 1921, no? We cannot keep thinking on the same basis. Now, I know that there are some issues here, because the traditional thinking on this topic was, but if you have members of Parliament who are still carrying on with their normal jobs, then they are still more in contact with the people. And I know that at the moment, Malta is considering a kind of hybrid transition formula. We tend to do this. We tend to be quite original, which is to offer a choice. So members of Parliament in Malta, you can't do this in the European Parliament, of course. Members of Parliament in Malta could, if the changes that I hear of at least will be implemented, will go to a phase where they can choose between being part-time or being full-time. And of course we're always talking of backbenchers, because the moment you are part of the executive, then you need to be full-time. And I agree that the issue does need to be addressed by the two major political parties together, and even through a wider discussion, because it requires consensus on our political decision-making process. As regards the other matter, I'm very much attuned to what Roberta has said, so maybe I don't need to repeat the same arguments. But what we certainly need to do is to address the question of fielding effectively more candidates, not least because of the proven fact that there is practically a direct ratio and equality between percentage of candidates and then percentage of members of Parliament. So we need to address that. Now, it is not easy. It is not easy even for the parties from what we know, because many are approached and not all would contest from those who are approached. Of course, there are issues why they will not, and you mentioned a few of them. Family issues, commitment issues, the fact that even the environment is not necessarily one that promotes gender equality. And so this is why new measures are being introduced. I know the National Parliament is now experimenting with 1 day a week where the meeting time is different. Fine, that's one step, but much, much, much more than that is required. And we do need to put our heads together, address the root causes of what causes inequality, and redress those root causes in a very effective manner. Because until we do that, the decision-making process, as I emphasized in the beginning, is very far from being complete, let alone fair and appropriate.
Thank you.
Well, I tend to relate to a lot of what my colleagues have said, basically. And somebody said, you know, the women's spaces and the bed and in the kitchen, and relating that to politics, the way we work in Parliament. A lot of people think it's a place where you have lunches and cocktail parties. Sometimes you get home at 11 o'clock at night, and the bed is a very good place to be in at that time, believe me. And also, it is a kitchen. It is a very hot kitchen, where sometimes you know the heat is very strong and the smell is not so nice. So really, it's not so different from what they think we should be doing. However, I do think that sometimes, and I must say, it has been a very, very interesting debate. And although I don't agree with quotas, and that's known fact since time immemorial, I do understand why there should be quotas. I just don't respect women enough, and I believe in women's capability enough not to be given a particular place because you are a woman. Because I think Francis said that very well, we have to encourage people to participate. We have to make it easy for women to participate. Times in Parliament, we work full-time in the European Parliament, but here it's not, but times in the national Parliament are not conducive to what a woman does. Because let's face it, women in society do have a different role from men, and that's something that has to be accepted. Women are still expected to be wives and mothers. This is culture. Should we change this? I don't know. It's not necessarily bad. But you should make it easy for those women who are mothers, who are wives, and want to pursue a career in politics or whatever. You have to make it easier for them. And to go into national politics, when you have to start going there, I think it's 7 o'clock at night, well, no, it's not conducive. So yes, we have to ensure that culture starts from schools. Thank God we have co-educational schools who I think will bring up a generation of children who feel equal, and that's very important.
And to understand as well.
And to understand that they're not different, the boys are not better than the girls. So we have to start from there. We have to start from the culture, but we have to start also from ourselves. We must not put a hurdle, a psychological hurdle to ourselves, because sometimes we don't realize that because I'm a woman, I probably won't make it. No, that's not. That is something that we have to to eliminate completely. And we mustn't find excuses. Excuses, I didn't get there because they are the men, because they could. No, come on. If you make a destination, have a destination, and make sure that nothing in your way is there. If need be, kick it out of the way, because people are going to put hurdles. But if you need to be, find a door closed, well, you have a pair of very good feet, kick it in. But, quotas are not the solution. I can understand why they're there. They should be temporary, but how temporary? We're going to get academic here. How temporary? We don't know. Well, I think, listen, believe in yourselves, women. Politics is media. I haven't been in media. I'm sure it's not an easy place to be, and I respect those women, Luzel, Miriam, and the others I'm not mentioning here, who have been in the media and have done a good job. Not because they were women, because they had a mind there to do a good job. But first of all, we have to believe in ourselves.
Thanks, Marlene. Sylvana, without that, I know you have your own views about quotas, but with regards to media, what happened a few months ago to a person who was a public person, definitely Valletta was a journalist and a person in the media? Would that an assassination like that help this generation here to come forward and be in politics and be in media?
It should. Whether it will is another matter. It should, because we say we have free speech, and then we go on the internet and you express an opinion and you get shut down. It should, because we say that journalists should be fearless, but the first thing that we do is, on whose toes am I treading? Oh, shall I draw back? And the minute that you say that, you're committing, for me, you're committing professional seppuku, suicide in ritual Japanese or something. Japanese or something. Daphne's assassination was significant, not only in what we've been hearing in the political sense, in the journalistic sense, in all the senses that have been exhausted so far, but should remain being discussed, because the minute one forgets is the minute one commits the same mistake. Daphne's assassination is relevant also because she was the recipient of attacks and of a systematic dehumanization, which I strongly suspect, even on evidence which we have these days, that a male blogger, a male journalist, would never have been subjected to. She was systematically, because of her abilities, because her abilities were not her investigative abilities, her linguistic abilities were of a level, and the ladies will find this in your course of work. I found it out myself. I'm on a table and I say something. No reaction. Guy next door, it's always a guy next door, because many times I used to be the only female on the table. Guy next door says exactly the same things, similar words. Genius. Genius. Yes. But so, what did I do? Did I go to a corner? Rachel, what do you think I did?
Knowing you?
I did a Marlene. I kicked. That's what you have to do in life. But men do it as well. Men have a different style of doing it. So what? It's a matter of style. Mary Gertie said something which made my hackles rise, with all due respect. What are the politicians doing to encourage or cultivate a new generation of women? Essentially, what is the National Council of Women doing? I would love to see a national program being instituted, and if they tell me funds, yes, okay, fine. I mean, the European Parliament is so they help you with funds. But ما نعرفش كيف يحلونا the bureaucracy is awful. But I appreciate the issue of funds, but I would like to see NGOs, I would like to see university, I would like to see other institutions, including the one which I am part of, the church, which create more programs, which train people into the media, which train people into politics, into public speaking, into portrayal. I appreciate a lot Miriam's comment, who was reporting another comment, about lead program being for cosmetics and makeup. Big news on television, even men wear makeup. Big news. Francis, I don't know how many times you've been.
We have to counter the effect of the spotlight light in the studio. So men have to do it as well. Yes, otherwise, I don't know about that.
It's no big issue.
We don't always get the luxury of doing it. But anyway,
I was hoping here that you wouldn't say especially because we are bigger lights than the light that's reflecting. And of course it's not. But I always also want to say one thing. Keep a sense of perspective. It's not all about you. It's not all about, it's because I'm a woman and they're hounding me. Perhaps there really is a man who is better than me. But the possibility is 50%. We are living in a democracy. We say we are living in a democracy. Are we living in a democracy? Look at Parliament. 8 women out of 70. When it's almost 51% women are in demographic growth. Is that democratic? It's up to you.
Thanks, Sylvana. Brenda, 2 minutes you have. Because we need to conclude.
Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers who've gone before me. Makes my job a tiny little bit easier because I think I'm going to be the last speaker. I'm worried that today's conversation is a little bit cyclical. We have come around in a circle, and I often worry in situations like this that we haven't come to a firm place. I think it was Sylvana, the last speaker, who said we're not living in a democracy. We're also not living in a meritocracy. We don't live in a meritocracy. If we lived in a meritocracy, we would have 50% women and 50% men represented in Parliament. So when we say quotas don't work, and when we say it would be a backlash on women if we allow women to go forward based on quotas, we're speaking within a framework of the patriarchal system. Because we're saying, these are the rules, the men made up the rules. The rules are that we must have a meritocracy in order to proceed and to qualify. But for 1,800 years in British Parliament, there was quotas in place. Only men were allowed to be there. That was the quota. And in Malta and in Ireland, where we are post-colonial, new countries, the same rule applies. The same patriarchal, misogynistic rule applies around quotas, which have existed for the last 121 years in Ireland, and for the last 121 or 146 or 146 since 1946 and since 1974, depending on when we mark our moment, we've had masculine quotas in place, where we don't ask the men, are they good enough? They get elected, because there's a quota system in place. It's a cultural quota system that we've been subscribing to all of this time. And what concerns me is that we're consistently and continuing to subscribe to this discourse that upholds this patriarchal system, this masculine system of political life, which is not democratic and is not, by any means, meritocracy of work.
Thank you.
And that's what we've been subscribing to all of this time. I have some more things I'd like to say. I don't have time. One last comment, I promise, which is around making our structures more people-friendly or feminine, which is that we think about Parliament not happening at night, so that women and men can go home to their families after their day's work. Greg Dyke, when he took over at the BBC as Director General, made a profound change. They used to have a meeting that happened every Monday morning and took everybody's time on a Sunday to prepare for. And when he went in on Monday morning, the very first time he took over, he said, "What's all this about? Why are you spending all of your Sundays in preparation for Monday morning's meeting?" And it was, "Well, this is how it's done." we give up our Sunday and our family life and our me time to prepare for Monday morning's meeting. So he said, well, that's not really very good. That's a system, but this isn't something we could do about it. It's how it's always been. And he said, well, actually, what we'll do is we'll move Monday morning's meeting to Tuesday. So they spent Monday at work preparing for Tuesday's meeting. So we can change systems, we can change ways of thinking. We don't have to keep stepping up against the wall saying, but this is how it is, this is how it's always been, we can't make a change. We can have events like this at a time that are accessible to everybody who wants to come. We can have Parliament at a time where everybody can actually go to it and they get home to their families. And we can have systems in place that allow women to get elected onto the ticket, onto the candidature, without us constantly saying, but are they good enough? Because we've had 1,000 years in British Parliament of men not necessarily being good enough, but being there nonetheless. I think that probably answers that.
Thank you very much. And just to conclude, today I'm licensed to say this feminist comment, which I think Margaret Thatcher said it in 1965. If you want something to be said, ask a man. If you want something to be done, ask a woman.
Anna, thank you very much. It was really well done. You put a lot of work down. It was really well done.
Hi.